The year is 2004. The stage is set. It is young Simba versus the great Mufasa. It is the 13-year-old Magnus Carlsen versus the OG, the legendary Garry Kasparov in his prime. At that time, Garry Kasparov was rated a cool 2,831. Okay, it is not going to appear here. And Magnus, only an IM then, rated 2,484. This was a knockout style tournament, and as mentioned, Magnus is only 13 years old. Let's see how this encounter went between the two, also being their first official rated encounter. Magnus had the white pieces and started with 1d4. Garry responds by going d5. Magnus goes c4, c6, some Slav structure, knight to f3, knight to f6, and knight to c3. We now transpose into the semi-Slav after e6 and bishop g5. Here we get knight to d7 and e3. So now we're moving into a queen's gambit declined. A lot of what we call transpositions. And here Garry plays this queen to a5, known as the Cambridge Springs defense. And years later, Magnus said in an interview that he was quite surprised that Garry went for this Cambridge Springs setup because Garry was known for going for this g6, bishop g7 castles, just your standard King's Indian setups, which could also come from this setup. Like instead of, let's say, okay, queen to a5, you can also get the bishop e7. Perhaps here, this g6 it wouldn't be too apt in the setup, but not wrong by any means. I mean, you could go bishop g7, and after castles, you do the same, and you get a King's Indian-like setup here. Although the tabiat is in a Queen's Gambit decline, but Garry would be known for playing more structures like this. Instead, then Garry went for this queen to a5 setup. After queen to a5, then Magnus just goes knight to d2, playing a very principled top move in the engine. As we can see here in the database, still even today, well, in recent times, very common and often played. So knight to d2, we get bishop to b4 then. Garry just piling up here. Magnus is not a problem. I'm going queen to c2. After queen to c2, then Garry castles. We get bishop to e2. Magnus just continuing his development, aiming to castle either short or long. Which way will he go? Garry then strikes in the center with e5, and here, yes, you could of course take, and the position is still fine for both sides, if I can show that quickly. So we get here this d takes e. You could capture back, but it comes at some weakness because now, well, you have double pawns here, right? So after that, then you'd first come in here, try and add some more pressure, but after you do this, takes. Yes, white is up a pawn, but it's not that much. Of course, now you cannot really castle to the short side because, well, you just lose a knight, and if you castle kingside, you are losing this pawn, and suddenly black would be better. Right, so after all of this business, we get the rook to d1, which is forced, and eventually you do pick up this pawn. And here you might prefer black because after castles, maybe you play something like f6. To my mind, maybe f6. I don't know how strong that would be, or not really that good because knight to b3 hits the queen. So maybe we first take. I'm not too sure. Okay, if we go into a queen trade, then this is quite a drawn early queen endgame. But if he takes with the rook, maybe let's see. Then look at this tactic. Wow, knight to f3. And the thing is with knight to f3, it looks like you're hanging your knight for, well, just giving it up for nothing. But actually, look at the full board. Queen would take on g5 because this knight makes space for that queen to come and hit that bishop. In fact, if you took g takes here, not really good. You take here, we'll check. The king to h1 is forced. You take, bishop would take, and yes, okay, it is equal material. Black is slightly to be preferred, nothing much though. But I mean, seeing such beautiful jabs is really, really cool to see. But objectively, the position should still be playable and holdable for white. All right, none of that happened though. If we go back then, after this e5 push, we get a castles by Magnus. After castles, Garry just captures them on he takes d. And now we get this knight to b3. So of course you cannot take here because, well, you would just lose your queen. So the queen must drop back. The queen goes to b6, and now we get e takes d. And then it's suggesting knight takes d, but e takes d is also fine. After that, we get more takes there with the pawns. D takes c, and we get bishop takes c4. So Magnus has got some nice prospects here, right? The bishop is eyeing, the bishop is there, this knight can jump, this knight's got potential, the rooks can come into play easily, the queen can join an attack easily. And here you must wonder, optically, how's black really doing? If black moves this knight, let's say, for example, just for argument's sake, back to b8, well, you take that knight immediately. So let me show you. Knight to b8, this game is practically over because now you're opening your king there, weakening, double F ones. Your rook's coming in. Look at that nice rook lift. Get a step ladder, whether you're tall or short, that rook is breaking in. So we get a5 then after a5. Well, Magnus says not the problem. I'm playing a4, stopping any funny ideas of you continuing your a advancement. So we get queen to c7 by Garry, and we still in theory. This is known territory. This position now in move 14 has been played before. We see here in the 90s, 1999, this position was reached. In 2008, it was reached after. So every game after 2004, then obviously then most likely followed this setup. And okay, this is not a full-blown database with all games, right, on the Lichess base, but there is a significant amount to show that, okay, two players had followed this game after 2004. Okay, but now we get this rook a to e1, and still very much followed. But as we see the moves come now after h6, bishop to h4, bishop to d6, that's the inaccuracy, and now move 16, this position, well, on this database has not been reached again. So why is this an inaccuracy then? Because the engineer is suggesting just go knight to b6, and perhaps then the argument is, well, okay, if this then you take here, not really a good idea because now the knight takes, and there's a lot of play here and activity suddenly, right? Because now let's say you want to drop back your bishop, you're in a lot of trouble. The queen's coming into f4. There's a lot of potential down here. You're hitting the bishop firstly, so you have to go bishop to g3. You go up. If you trade here, not good because now how are you going to deal with this pawn being weak, right? So you play funny moves like let's say you can't even go rook b1 because, well, look at that. GG's. So how are you defending this pawn, right? That is the problem. If you try stuff like this, you're losing your rook that way. There's even ideas of this bishop. Look at those sniper bishops. So powerful, right? So this is why it can slip so easily for black here, right? And if you think, okay, well, that suddenly you're getting mated. Queen to g6. You cannot take here because you are in check with the bishop on c4, so you'd have to go there. And suddenly you are just getting bullied with this rook lift as mentioned, coming to h4 and breaking in there eventually. So if we go back then after h6, bishop to h4, and now we get bishop to d6. Magnus just calmly and so maturely, the young Simba playing this h3 maneuver. Really nice move. h3, we now get knight to b6, and now Magnus captures, right? Now it's a bit different. After this, you can do this because if you take here now, let's say here, not really good because you're about to get mated. Knight then to f6, king to g7, king to h7, knight takes, and king to h6 followed by that, and g4. Yes, that is the answer. There's no way out for the king there. If you go here, can't. You go there, can't. Can't go to the 5th, 6th rank because the queen occupies there. So this is why it would be a mistake to say taking that free piece, that knight there on f6. So we get this instead. After knight to c4, we get knight to e4. Garry gives the check on h2. We get king to h1. And now the blunder, knight to d6. So there's some pressure here on Garry because now he's thinking, okay, well, if he takes here, I can do stuff like this. He blocks that way, and I go back, right? But this is the problem. right? You can break there. So let's see the trap that Carlsen set then, right? Because Gary would love for Carlsen to just do this, right? And then the bishop just drops back, and it's fine. I think even if you did this, okay, it's still then it's obviously just bishop is hitting the queen and the rook. So yeah, bishop back to d6, and it's just drawn, dead drawn, boring. Everyone goes home, right? Uh, we get the king to h1 then and the knight to d6 blunder. And Carlsen takes, having quite a strong advantage. King takes on h2. We get knight takes on e4 with check, a discovered check, because the knight has made way for the queen. And now we get this bishop to e5. But Carlsen can just, Gary just drops back now, of course. But now Carlsen can go for this. Could have went for this d5, and the reason why d5 is so potent is because you cannot take. If you take here, the queen hangs, right? And now you'd have to find some funny maneuvers. And the thing with d4 to d5 is also opening up for this knight to join the attack. Remember, this knight is pinned to the queen, right? If it moves away, you are losing your queen easily. Then it's over, right? So d5 comes with a lot of positional problems. You'd have to find moves like, let's say, rook e8. And here's this knight to e4 entrance. White still enjoys a very strong advantage here if you go king to d7. Not a problem. I take on c6, you take back. I'm definitely going up pawn at the very least, right? You're taking on c6, that rook would have to slide away. When you could even really, if you really wanted to, take there, okay, you'd actually be slightly worse there, right? So you'd apply more pressure. And you think that, okay, if you did this, you'd be fine. No, you're not, because the knight takes on e5. Your queen is under attack. You have to drop away. And now you're just adding more pressure. This position is crumbling for Kasparov. Not something you often hear, eh? But instead of that, Magnus did not trust himself. As he did say, he was very nervous here. He just went for this queen to c5. And here, Kasparov had to find some resourceful moves, right? Still, rook to d8 is found. Now Carlsen goes for d5, but Garry can just slide then to d7. Carlsen goes knight to d4. So it's the right sequence, but in the wrong order, right? The idea is correct, but the order is incorrect, the move order. Knight to f5, then of course Garry would just love for Carlsen to take and play this position that way. Because this is just it's a pass pawn, but it can't maybe do that much because here you could blockade with the bishop, yes, on d7. And the game would just continue with white, obviously being slightly better. But now after knight to f5, Carlsen then finds the right move of going d takes c. We get b takes c and knight captures on c6. So now the rook is under attack. You have to move it away. He does. Garry does. Goes to rook to e8. And Carlsen just hits that queen. So beautiful. Takes control of the d file. Right? We now get this queen to e6. And Carlsen just tries to add more pressure with this rook to e1. Rook f to e1. Trying to hit that queen like that. Maybe for some discovery ideas on the queen. We get bishop to b7 by Garry. So now Garry is busy liquidating the position. Despite Carlsen being up a pawn, there is no significant attack right now. One reason is because this deep one is gone now, right? And now after this knight to d4, we just get trades. You might think that after bishop to b7, there's some juicy idea of maybe, let's say, I don't know, bishop takes there. Not really, because you can just do that, right? Now you're threatening a mate too. You have to capture to get rid of the checkmate. And yeah, you just up a piece as black, right? Because you end up dropping back. But now Kasparov could most likely easily take this from here. So instead of bishop to g7 ideas, it drops back to d4, the knight takes, and now Carlsen's slightly better in this endgame, but not by much. We get queen to g6 again, threatening mate on g2. So Carlsen defends with queen to g4. It's also Carlsen basically saying, let's liquidate and go into a draw. Takes, and now we get bishop to c6, Kasparov attacking the a4 pawn. Carlsen just blocks and defends with b3. f6 then by Garry. Carlsen goes bishop to c3. So playing it slightly inaccurate, but I mean, even from here on out, there's not much you can squeeze from here. It's opposite colored bishops. It's a drawn endgame most likely, yeah? We get rook takes, and here bishop to d5 hitting this pawn here. Carlsen says, I'll go rook to b1. Garry goes king to f7. Better here was rook to b8 to hit here twice, but also just bringing the king in, not a problem at all, because you always have time to go rook to b8 after king to g3. Now we get rook to b8, and this is basically liquidating now. After b4, we get a takes, and bishop to c4. And we get a few more moves, a5. Although, yes, it's a past a pawn, it is promoting on a light square, so that's the other problem. Can't do that much. We get bishop to a6, blockading, preventing the pawn to push f3. We get king to g6, king to f4, h5. So Garry just undoubling for Carlsen, but at the same time getting rid of another pawn. So the more pawns you're rid of here, the easier it becomes to draw it. King to h5, and that's also an important point for all those looking to improve their game and in the end game. If you are like in this position, down a pawn, try and exchange as much as you can, as Gary is showing us here. King to h5, rook to h1, king to g6, then after h5, and we get bishop to c5. After bishop to c5, then we get rook to b2, just a couple more shuffling moves. After rook to b2, we get king to g3, just defending on the g2 pawn. Rook then to a2, bishop to b6, king to f7 by Kasparov, rook to c1 by Carlsen, g5, and rook to c7, king to g6, the rook comes to c6, maybe trying to look for some funny ideas here, hitting this bishop, some more discoveries, and bishop to f1. So now you have to go bishop to f2 to stop this here. But at the same time, as you do that, you have to relinquish and give up your a5 pawn. But it was in this position then on move 52 that Garry Kasparov and the young Magnus Carlsen agreed to a draw. Fascinating stuff to say the least. Let's say he didn't play bishop f2. Let's say yeah, he went rook there. Suddenly you are in huge trouble after rook takes on g2. You cannot go to f4. You cannot go to h4 because of this pawn on g5. You only have one square there, and now suddenly after rook to d2, another nasty discovery there because now you're hitting this rook on d6. That is GG's. So yeah, that was a nice little only move though, and very nice to find. Obviously, their level they would find it easily, but nice defensive move. But in bishop to f2, the next move is to take on a5. But it was after bishop f2 that Magnus offered Garry the draw, and they agreed on move 52. So yes, guys, there we see how the young Simba had marked his territory, coming for the great Mufasa. I know the analogy is a bit strange because it's father and son and they're not related, of course, but in terms of chess and strength, we can see the potential already here in the 13-year-old Magnus Carlsen showing what he's made of. Although he lost the next game in the knockout format, this game really showed spectators that, hey, this is one kid to watch out for. And I mean, looking back now, 20 years later, he has shown us what he's made of, man. Probably the best to ever do it. And it's funny, Magnus's rating is actually close to just a bit higher than Gary's was at the time. Yeah, Magnus is about 28.37 right now, and Gary is 28.31 at this game. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it insightful. If you really liked it, do consider hitting that like button, comment, and subbing. It would mean a lot for the channel. And do check out more of our videos here, or is it there? Yeah. I'll see you guys very soon for the next video, yeah? Take care and have a great day ahead. Bye.